Welcome to the Genius Zone here on Edge Radio Australia. Look how excited this young lady is. She's just fired up. Arms just, look at this. She's pumping the sky.
I have to.
Oh.
We've got to tell the technology angels and guides to bless us.
Oh, please. If you could just be
especially at this time of the year.
I'm with you 100% on that. Really, honestly. We're pretty happy with that one.
Yep.
Look, absolutely great to have people on board jumping on already on the different streams. So I really appreciate that. That is so cool. Lots of things coming up on the screen. So I'm just going to keep flicking some little buttons, get the old technology guides all aligned.
That's it.
Because I've just said the term gods. We've got a little bit of Easter thing going on
we
here.
We have. And that's what it's all about today, because we're talking about how to outwit the devil.
Outwit the devil. Jeez. Okay.
Yes.
Don't want to start low. Let's go straight for the top.
Let's just go straight in for it.
The
I've never been much for small talk.
No, all right. No, honestly, there's something we do here. Honestly, Edge. Do we ever talk about the weather? Not really. No. We talk about all those things that in good company you're not supposed to talk about.
Well, this is true.
Let's talk some religion. Let's talk some politics. Let's talk some sex. Let's get it all going on.
Why not? Freedom of speech.
Couldn't agree more.
But, even if people don't believe in the devil, Aaron, the fact is that, stuff happens.
I've met her. So, as far as I'm concerned.
I love the way she's a she.
Oh,
of course,
you noticed
she's
that?
a
Just
she.
slide that in there. Well, okay, it's different for everybody, I guess. But, I have come face to face with it.
Well, maybe can I just change your perception a little bit?
Give it a crack. Why not?
Okay, let's have a crack at it.
Okay.
So what if I told you, have you ever heard the saying, the devil made me do it?
Yes.
Okay, so what if she was overtaken by an evil spirit?
Right.
Okay, not to be too deep. I don't want to get too,
An evil spirit.
However, what I am saying is that, in a lot of places where they're talking spiritual, they'll say there is a spirit of, some sort of evil energy going on, whether it's a spirit of fear or a spirit of jealousy, or a spirit of laziness, or it could be any
you can
spirit.
walk into a room and there's that heavy weight, right? Okay, and there seems to be something like, there's a pressure, there's an evil, right? Sometimes there's a sense of it, yeah.
Well, every good movie has, the dark side and the light side.
Okay,
so however you want to look at it, I feel that it's really important that we are super aware of who's running the show. So can we say it that way? Who's driving your bus?
Ooh, who's driving my bus?
So who's driving your bus?
My bus is sort of just, it's kind of just out of control. It's going downhill. There's a big drop off to the side. This is something that looks like, South America, where there's a, 300 or 400 metre drop off the side. That's how my bus is travelling right now.
Well, what if you could turn it into an action thriller where you actually come down the road and it starts to kind of, dip down, and then it goes to crash, and then all of a sudden you come to this ditch and you jump out and another decoy comes along, you jump into a new car and off you go in a new direction.
Okay, this is a bit Stephen King meets Born Ultimatum, really, isn't it? Yeah, okay, a bit of that going on. But
I was going to go with The Matrix, but Stephen King might be a bit more exciting. But you know what I mean? Because it's about knowing that you do not have to stay on the same track. Because if you keep on doing the same thing, what's going to happen? You're going to keep getting the same thing, right?
Of course you are.
So you've got to do something different.
Oh, okay. I agree with you on that one.
You really do. So you've got to do something different. And, I'm going to come back to the old age saying that I always say, and that is that you've got to ask yourself the right questions. What am I feeling?
Yeah.
What am I thinking? What's the worst thing? Am I making some stuff up in my head?
We all do it, don't we? We write our own narrative, and sometimes it's a very negative one, right? That could be the little devil on the shoulder, perhaps, but it's true. I mean, the power of your own language, the power of your own internal dialogue is massively important.
It so is.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I've said it on the show before, but Napoleon Hill, I always just sort of refer to Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, his teachings are very much a man's world because, of course, that was back in the day of, Henry Ford and the Rockefellers and, all of those, Albert Einstein. So it was in the era of all the greats and, he chose to have a meeting with himself and the devil.
Right.
Yeah. And in the meeting, he would sit there and I guess if I'm going to kind of make this a little bit more practical, he'd have a bit of an argument with himself. So he would realize that there is something going on in his life that's not working.
Okay.
And usually that involves another human being.
Almost always, yeah.
Almost always. There's another human being or three involved.
Yeah.
So, he would sit down and he would literally change chairs and look at it from the devil's perspective on one hand.
Okay.
And then I guess the greater good, what he wanted. And, well, if you want to bring in the lightness, whatever you'd like to say. And kind of what he was doing is he was really distancing himself from the issue at hand and looking at it more objectively.
Look, it's a great point because when you are in it, when you're so close to it, it is hard to actually see things very clearly.
Oh, yeah.
You become so much more objective when you actually step outside and just that view from above. Kind of in today's language, I think, so much. Sometimes we need to be our own drone, okay, and kind of like just be up there buzzing above our heads, rather, and looking at it from a different perspective.
I like that drone because that's so millennium. That's so now, isn't it?
It's so true. Yeah.
But we say like zoom out.
Yep.
Because you've really got to zoom out. I can remember when I was first learning NLP and I was in this really cracking challenge with a whole community of people, including some of my family. Okay. And, I was really coming up against this massive challenge where decisions that I was making, a lot of people were saying, no, it's not the right decision. You can't do this.
So many naysayers, right?
Oh, really? There are.
Look, sometimes it's a good thing because, again, they're seeing it from a different perspective, maybe. And often, look, their meddling is pure of heart because they try to see the best for you, right? But more often than not, it's not.
Well, actually, Aaron, you know what? You got it right the first time. But honestly, this is the whole thing. If we learn, because I learned this through NLP, I mean, I was really hurt and bust up with some people that were very significant and very, very close to me. Okay. And when we learned this perceptual shift where you literally had to rise above and get out of the mud, like you just said, how sometimes we get so involved in it, we kind of get stuck. And if we let ourselves continue in that stuckness, we're not going to be able to move forward. But you know what, at the end of the day, you know what we've got to do? We've got to get out the freaking way of ourselves.
That is one of the most honest opinions you can have. Get out of your way of yourself. Like we are on so often, like we are the brakes, right? We are the problem. Okay. Like it's hard to look in the mirror and go, I am the problem. But I think so often we need to do it.
Oh, Lord, it's hard to be humble.
Very humble indeed.
It is true. It's true, So when we can get out of the way of ourselves, even when we're in a situation, actually I'll tell this story briefly, but of course Easter time came around and I decided I'd go to church and I went with my mum.
Yep.
So I went along and I didn't know why I decided, I'm going to go with mum. Mum got a little tap on her shoulder. Okay. It wasn't the devil.
Right. It was the other one, the other shoulder? Okay.
Some people may have thought. But anyway, she turned around and apparently this person said, you are speaking on the stage. Now, this is like a big commercial church with all the fancy stuff, the lights,
show. Gotcha.
Their musician team are more like a rock band, that kind of thing.
I know, right, yeah.
And Mum was so brave, and the first thing I knew is I needed to say something to her without being rude, something to do with, Mum, you need to get out of the way of yourself. This is not about you.
Okay.
Now, the moment that a person's perception changes, and I know this is a completely different topic, but this goes for a lot of people that need to show up. Sometimes they don't want to show up. They're playing this negative recording in their brain, and I'm telling you, some of these people, I mean, I'm great at this. Blockbuster movies that, billion-dollar box office movies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Blockbuster went out with the dinosaurs, but you know what I'm talking about. And you just you suddenly get this thought, right? Next thing you know, you're playing this great big dramatic movie on the movie screen that's bigger than Ben-Hur. And, of course, what's happening to your energy? It's going but we know we've got to be able to switch off that.
You do. Okay, but the switch, honestly, sometimes it gets jammed. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And to switch out of that, and if you are carrying negativity, if there are things going wrong with your life, it is hard to, I always use the term fake it till you make it. And I always want to make very clear that doesn't necessarily mean being fake. It just means, for me, that term is about flicking that switch.
Yeah, showing up maybe too, and
very much
getting out of the way of yourself.
Yeah.
I think there does come a time though where it's okay to be totally honest, even if we're struggling. But the difference between being totally honest about our dirty laundry, so to speak, is to make sure that we do get a perspective on it first. So we've got to be able to shift
how would you perception. Do that? How would you do that?
Okay, so it's really a perceptual shift. So remembering back to what I said at the beginning of the conversation where I had some significant people close to me that I was feeling really quite burnt about.
Right.
And, I thought, really became quite, angry, disappointed.
I'm so disappointed.
I mean, disappointed is just so wishy-washy. It was beyond disappointment.
It was far beyond that.
It was beyond. It was hurt. Okay, so hurt is probably the right word.
Yep.
And something, why was I hurt? Because I was perceiving what I was feeling and what that was doing to me. So again, it was all about me, right? Of course. So what I had to do is I had to literally zoom out of my circumstance and put on a different hat.
Okay.
So if you had 3 hats there, right?
I would actually just off camera.
I would literally get you to switch hats.
Okay.
We do this kind of thing, and it's it's no different to Napoleon Hill talking to the devil. Only he changed seats. So they call it a spatial anchor.
Okay.
So in NLP, if a person's angry or if they're pent up or something's going on, they're usually locked into a certain posture. So even if they change their posture, they usually go back to it. So
That's interesting.
So if you are really kind of like, I'm going to use that word elegant again, if you're quite elegant, you can, really maneuver that person so they're sitting differently or they're turning their body. Like if you turn your body, just switch.
We mirror each other, don't we?
Can you do that just for a moment?
Well, it's a little bit
everybody do that? I know, but just shift. But even okay, put your arms up in the air. Okay,
shall I wave them like I just
put it behind, wave them like that you don't care. Put it behind your head. Now, if everybody at home or everybody listening does that, you'll find that, and just swing a little, you will find that it shifts the energy. So the energy begins to shift. So spatial anchoring, visual anchoring, kinesthetic anchoring. So that's one way. Physical anchoring is shifting your body, changing the way you feel by, that's why a lot of people do exercise and they're addicted to running, and they do that because they're in their body literally, and they're out of their mind, which, as you've heard me say before, lose your mind and come to your senses. I mean, Richard Bandler was an absolute genius at it. If someone was in a real depressant state, guess what he would do?
What's that?
Throw them on a roller coaster.
Well, that fixes everything. I mean, for me, it does. I mean, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, well, suddenly you're not thinking about what you're thinking about.
But the simple thing of posture you're talking about before, honestly. Okay, when you are feeling down, what do? You curl into yourself. You're bringing the spine down. You kind of, your posture is looking downwards.
Yeah.
Whereas, it is a very simple thing. The old sit up straight, right?
Yeah.
Back at school.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you do change your posture, you can. It's a subtle but effective way of changing your energy.
Exactly. And it's very easy to do. It's the one thing that if someone's learning practitioners, if you can just teach people how to shift their body, you don't even have to tell them to do it. You can literally be with them and shift around, and they'll naturally shift with you. The other one is, like we said, about the hat. Yep. Okay, so if you had two hats there, and let's just say you were telling me about how you're angry with someone, or you're upset, or you're in a world of pain over something. Let's just say, I would say, okay, let's call that, I'm not going to put it on that hat because you wear that hat a lot, but one of the hats that you don't wear, maybe the helmet. Okay. That's under the helmet. So you pretend
we have Peter Brock's helmet just off there.
Okay. So we have helmets. We have helmets in the room. We have other hats. So I would say to you, take that hat off. Now let's just say, put on that hat. Now this hat is going to be the hat of where you're going to look at everything objectively. So this is what I was doing. I was looking at the situation so that I was seeing myself with the significant person.
Sure.
And I was kind of looking at it from afar through a stranger's eyes.
Right.
But then I then jumped into the significant person who was, in my mind, questionable and who I wanted to kill, just joking.
We've all been there.
And as I kind of allowed myself to get into their state, and you've really got to be serious about this, I immediately recognised they were scared for me. They were doing something that wasn't as much as selfish about themselves as I had thought. And I recognised another way that where they were coming from. So instead of them coming from being an absolute, fag, they were really coming from a place of where they were really genuinely worried.
So they were trying to protect you, perhaps?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Or knew it wasn't going to be right. Right. And knew that it was just going to end up in a world of pain. Yep. That's what they thought. But even if they were wrong, they could have been wrong. But the fact is that, when you go in and you actually literally look through their eyes, and you literally, feel through their skin and imagine that you're experiencing their world and looking back at yourself. It's quite interesting.
Well, it's perspective. It's as simple as that.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, you've got to remember not to kind of just neglect your own thoughts and feelings on it. You've got to embrace what you're feeling. So there's no point running away from that. And if you make a deliberate decision to say, okay, I'm going to get into this state. Right. I'm going to feel angry. I'm going to let the devil, just do his thing and work through my mind. So I'm imagining all this stuff. Because let's face it, most of it is fear, false evidence appearing real. Correct?
Correct.
How many times, Aaron, have you thought that someone was doing something, thinking something, feeling something, saying something, and you made up a big movie about it just to find out that it was completely different. Ever had that?
I had that only a few months ago with a friend who I hadn't seen for a long time, and I thought they were avoiding me. I'm thinking, why are you avoiding me? What have I done? I'm looking through the list of catalogue of things that are, may have been misinterpreted or whatever. I wrote a big story in my head about it, okay? And ultimately, it had nothing to do with me. They were going through a really bad time, and because they had retreated into themselves. Yeah. So I had created a problem that didn't exist.
Yes.
And the good news is that because I just thought, screw it, I'm going to contact you anyway, I was able to be there for them.
Exactly.
Which worked out really well.
Yeah.
So, but I spent months thinking that have I done something wrong? I'm looking at myself. I told myself that I was the devil in the scenario. Yeah. I just didn't know what I'd done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Living in the real world, sometimes we say things, we do things, and they might come from a good place, but you might screw up the execution of them, right? Yeah. You might say it wrong or whatever. So sometimes you can be misinterpreted.
Well, one of my mentors told a story about how he would never let the devil get his brain again because literally every conceivable thing that he was nervous, scared witless, going through never actually happened. And when it didn't end up happening, he realized that he'd broke out in hives. He was, he was totally next to, the hives were like shingles. And because he got so affected physically from his own depth of worry, fear, and all the rest of it, he promised himself, I am never going to let my brain do somersaults like that again. And
how do you stop your brain from doing it?
Yeah. Honestly, so this is the thing. Well, so we can go into that with some of the questions.
Well, let's jump into the questions. That's a top idea. Let's have a look. Turn the old clicky on here. So
here we go.
Our first question for the day. Here we are. There we go. Now, this is Ronnie from Canada. Hello, long way away. Absolutely gorgeous part of the world. Ronnie said, I catch myself spiraling into stories in my head where I assume my partner is out to hurt me and react badly. How can I know if it's real or if it's just in my head?
Okay, so interestingly, it is definitely in your head.
Right.
Because even
straight to the
right. So even if there is a spot of truth in it, there is no way known, Ronnie, that you can be completely right. A, because you are not a mind reader. B, you don't really know exactly what is going on in their situation. So, the best thing is to compose yourself. But here's the scariest thing about it all. Okay. When you are telling yourself that kind of story about that person, what you're doing is, even if that person and you end up, that it doesn't end up, if it's not a marriage or it just happens to be that you're dating or whatever, what you're going to end up doing is attracting it again.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's the old energy, wherever you put your focus, wherever attention goes, energy flows. So while you're spiraling into the stories that you're doing in your head and doing all these somersaults, what's actually happening is you're giving off an energy. And so that's poison.
It is
because
poison.
Then the other person has this unconscious, even if they're Mother Teresa or got the heart of Mother Teresa, she's now passed sadly, but even if they had the greatest heart, there is a part of their energy that would be feeling quite almost like they want to support the truth of your energy. Okay. Of what you're delivering. So if you're putting it out there, what you're doing is you're kind of almost bringing on this sad sack energy, like desperate people when they're looking for a relationship.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The greatest thing you can do is act like you're already taken.
Oh, look, people always want what they can't have, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how often have you been in a relationship where, then other people pour attention onto you because, the old this is very dishonest, but the old story of like guys who will go out and put a wedding ring on, right? Even if they're single, they'll go out because, quite frankly, a wedding ring attracts women like nothing else, right? It does. It really does.
Yeah.
So, and a quick hello to Melissa. Lovely to see you there. So thank you for that comment. As far as what you were saying about attracting that, and and I want to sort of refer this to Ronnie as far as catch myself spiraling into stories in my head. So somebody I've actually, have in my life, or used to have in my life, I guess, to a lesser extent, but a person who was always obsessed with stories of cheating and always worried about their partner cheating on them and that sort of thing, right? And guess what? Guess what they've done? They've hooked up with a cheater. Right? And you think to yourself, like, we talk about manifesting, but you have manifested everything that you've just wanted to avoid, right? Because you've had because you've talked yourself into it.
Yeah.
So the energy you've created has actually attracted everything you don't want. I mean, how silly is that?
You got it. You got it. Because you're literally doing what all the manifesting queens and kings and gurus out there that teach it tell you to do when you want something. And that is thinking about it all the time, telling yourself that it's true all the time, painting a picture of it. And this is where it's a really good idea to sit down with yourself and say, what am I thinking here?
Sure.
Get real with yourself and write it down. What am I truly telling myself? And then when
write it down, you said.
Yeah, write it down. So write it down. I'm telling myself that they're going to cheat on me. This is not going to work. This always happens to me. Just get everything out of your brain and onto the paper, because once it's out from here to here, your subconscious mind says, oh, well, we don't have to nurse and rehearse this anymore because it's gone from here to here. Now, the next part about it is to ask yourself the question, when in my life have I ever felt this way? So there's obviously there's a feeling of abandonment.
Sure.
There's a feeling of, rejection. There's a feeling of, just that whole element around that. And whatever that feels like personally to that person, they've got to ask themselves, well, what does it feel like? Where do I feel it in my body? Now, the last question is, when did this happen to me?
Okay.
When in my life? Now, it could have been a completely different scene altogether. It may not have even been that it was a partner. It could have been a friend. It could have been something you witnessed with parents.
Yep.
But you carried that energy, and that energy is the DNA that is coming back and triggering, right? Because we're like, dogs, they get triggered. You've heard about, dogs that get triggered by people with that look in a certain way because the postman with no hair, kicked them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they get triggered.
I mean, look, I'll use it. A dog is a great example because you are so right. I mean, how many of us have actually had rescue animals, right? Who have had, and I certainly have, and that animal's been through, has had a horrible past, right? They're going to there's the fear of that's going to happen again to them. That is part that it's sort of, I don't know, it's sunk into their DNA.
Yeah.
Now, whether that be a dog, a cat, or a ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
That's just the reality.
Cora's a rescue dog. Cora, my dog, Cora Kardashian, we call her, shared custody arrangement between myself and my daughter.
Right.
But you cannot get that trigger out of her body. And, so if a dog gets triggered, then how much more does a person get triggered?
Well, in this case, with Ronnie. So Ronnie, I mean, my sort of comment to you would be, let's look at your past and let's find the defining thing that's happened to you that has made you keep spiraling. The thing that why you're creating these stories in your head. Once you figure out why you're creating the stories in your head, why you're worried about abandonment, or I don't know.
Where it happened, when it happened.
When exactly right.
Yeah.
When was the the time that the switch was flipped.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And who was it that did that? So that's when you have to make peace with that person. You really do, because you've almost got to go back and make peace with the event or the situation, so that you can release that from your nervous system and you can be free of it. It doesn't mean to say that, you retain the wisdom, because we always retain the learnings. And the golden...
Do we though? Ooh,
no,
I don't know.
Not unless we know to. We don't.
Okay,
no.
Well, that makes more sense.
Absolutely. Otherwise, if we did, Aaron, we'd be in a much better world.
Yeah.
Leaders wouldn't make the same mistakes over and over again. Doctors wouldn't make the same mistakes over and over again, because they'd be able to go, oh, that's right, that medication nearly killed that person, and they had a DNA da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So what can I learn from this? And then change it, because doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a new result is the definition of stupidity.
It really is. Okay, let's jump to New Zealand. Okay, there we go. Let's talk to Lynn. Lynn is in Auckland. Lovely to see you there, Lynn. Now let's look at your question if we could. Now, Lynn says, I've been hurt before and find myself defensive about it and ruining relationships as if my mind isn't saying, here it goes again. Is there a way I can change this?
Okay, these guys must have been talking to each other.
I think so.
There must be something going on here.
This is such a common situation, though. This is something that so many think, You've been hurt before, and what you do is you close that part of your heart away because you don't want to be hurt again. You don't want to be vulnerable. I get that.
Exactly. Yeah, so I guess we'd have to go into a lot more detail, because I would need a little bit more context, Lynn, about this. However, what I would suggest that you do is that you write down exactly what happens to you. So when you say that this is happening and you're ruining, because I noticed that she said that she's ruining relationships. Is that what she said? Yeah,
absolutely.
So she's, okay, so she's defensive.
Yep.
And she is, okay, got it. Okay, interesting, because the defense is, they even say it in the Bible, if you defend yourself, your brother will hate you. Sometimes there is something in the Bible that says that. Now, there's a time and a place when we do need to defend ourselves, but sometimes not defending ourselves is more powerful. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
I heard this.
You've lost me on that
one. Okay. So I heard this metaphor the other day. I didn't make it up myself, but I thought it was a reasonably good one. And that is that if someone's got a gift and they give it to you and you decide you don't want to accept it, might be a bomb in it, for example, right? So you say, no, thank you. Okay. You don't accept it. Where does that gift stay? Unless they pass it on to someone else, it stays with them.
Yes.
Now, when a person is wanting to, if somebody attacks you and you're wanting, because usually the defendant is wanting to come back with something, correct?
Yeah.
And it's different if you're in a court, of course, or there's a time and a place. But let's just say it's just communication, relationships. So you're, somebody is fighting with you. They're sending you rude emails or they're just being nasty. Okay.
Could be just a troll of the internet.
Could be a troll of things. It could be, social media.
Yep.
By you remaining silent, in many cases, is the greatest thing you can possibly do until it's time to then step forward.
Now, is that the case of revenge is a dish best served cold? Or,
I've never heard of that.
You haven't?
I have not.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that. No. I've heard of success is the best revenge.
Yeah, but no, definitely. Like if you want to have revenge on someone, and I mean, look, revenge is a really ugly thing, okay? And I'm not going to lie, I've gone that way on the occasion. I don't mind.
Of course, we all have.
Yeah, we all have, right? For you being honest, we all have, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, if you let it just sort of stew for a while, just kind of curdle around the edges, give it a bit of time, let that, then it has so much more power.
And what about those, warriors, the keyboard warriors?
Oh.
And they just go. Have you ever sent an email? Oh my gosh, like I have to tell this story because this is just classic and I'll make it really short, right? Okay. But this is in the day when my initial husband and I first broke up.
Yep.
And sometimes he would send me some, text messages.
Okay.
But I was doing this NLP. So I was becoming more, how do you put it, like awakened, if you will. And so I was practicing all these techniques. And one of the techniques that I was practicing, and this one wasn't for him, but the perceptual positioning one. Right. So I did that with another significant person where I had to step into their shoes and go around, like I said, and I was able to really see how it was different for them, and there was that real neutralizing of everything. So in this case, when a text message would come from me and it was hot off the cuff, mm-hmm. and it was heated and it was full of, venom and whatever else, and he probably had every right to do it in his defense, right?
Okay.
And these are the earlier days. I would just ignore it. I would not mm-hmm. go back and do anything. But one morning, he sent me one, mm-hmm. and I was in a bad mood. So I start sending him one back. Now, you got to hear this, right? Because this was
why all
this
phones,
was a doozy.
Phones should be actually all have built-in breathalyzers, okay? So, yeah,
absolutely.
You should, before you start texting, that's what you need to do, right?
So off I went, keyboard warrior, and I went to town. So because, I tend to be sort of that, I don't know, I don't want to blow my own trumpet here, but I feel like there's a little bit of tolerance and patience on my behalf sometimes. And in this case, I just went for broke. And, Scorpio, the Scorpio came out, right? And I said, and I wrote this message to him, and I looked at the phone and I said to myself, I ain't never gonna send that message, right?
Oh, really? You stopped yourself?
Oh, yeah, because I usually would.
Well done.
And guess what? Ian came up behind me and cuddled me, and it went boom, and it said, how many of us, I guess my point there is how many of us have hit that send button on an email or something and then thought, oh, can I get that back? And this is why pausing.
Pausing is incredibly important, unbelievably important. It's something I never used to do. I used to be like, whether it be of replying straight away or verbally doing it or whatever, I used to be, hot to trot with the response, right? And one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life was just take the pause, have a moment, get a little perspective, and then make the statement. And I'll tell you right now, it changed my life.
Look, it is so true. Even for things like, my daughter studies. Yep. Here's me talking about my family. They're all going to kill me. So, she studies. And I say sometimes in order to let things land, you've got to stand up and empty the head and go and make yourself a cup of tea. Go for a walk in the park.
Right.
Go and empty out the cobwebs, because you'll be amazed how transmissions come through and ideas and the magic comes through in those moments where you just let go and you really just allow yourself to kind of move into that different perception and that different state. But I'm not sure if I did answer this question really well, but if I was to say one more thing towards it, I would say that if you could do a reframe on yourself by writing down exactly what you believe is going wrong, so get that really clear on paper, and then instead of going ahead and assuming that they're going to betray you, what if you could think about what else it could mean? What else could it mean? Mm-hmm. If this person's coming from the highest intention, could there be another meaning? And if you listen to what I said to our first question, I feel that that's going to also help definitely on that one with
I think on both of these, certainly for Lynn here, the power of the pause, I think is really important, because I absolutely understand that, look, Lynn, I've been very, very hurt in the past, and I tend to do exactly what you've just stated that you're doing. I mean, you do that whole, here we go again. And the problem with doing all of that is, okay, you're never escaping that hurt from, you're taking it it's like a trailer, okay? You've got that trailer, and everywhere you go, you've just got that trailer attached of negativity from the past, right?
Yeah.
Let the trailer go, just dump it. You know what, back it into the ocean. Who cares? Get rid of the damn thing.
Yeah.
And a pause, I think, is the smartest thing you can do with it. And just look at the perspective of the other person. They might just genuinely care about you, but again, they're not probably using the greatest tools in the world to
absolutely
get
and it's all up here, guys. Who's driving your bus? Take control of that steering wheel. Only perhaps imagine you've got a remote control and learn how to use it.
Okay. Sometimes that bus does feel like it's from the movie Speed, but that's another story. All right, let's jump into the next question here. So the next question is from Sydney, from Callum. Callum has put, my business was doing well until I got screwed over by one of my staff. This seems to be a repetitive pattern in my business. What am I doing wrong?
Ooh, yeah, okay. Now, that is a very interesting one. I totally can relate to this.
Okay.
And without knowing the full ins and outs of your business, Callum, I can only go on my own personal experience here. Mm-hmm. But if people are taking advantage, like you're feeling like you're being taken advantage of, are there boundaries set up in the beginning? Boom. Are there boundaries? The whole element of what we talked about before about learning and do we learn? Well, no, because if we did, then everybody would be in a far better situation. But if there was nothing else that I could tell you today on this topic, it would be one thing. If I could just say one thing, it is the learning game. However, in order to learn, you've got to integrate.
Okay.
And integrating means that it's going to mean that you're going to have to go back in time to the staff people, for example, or the people that hurt you, and look at, some of the biggest offenders or, episodes that were happening. And see if you can look at it from a different perspective. So look at it, zoom out and look at it from above and ask yourself, what is it that you need to learn here? Because this obviously has happened more than once.
Yep.
And this is what happens to all of us.
So many of us.
Yeah, because we all have patterns. Because the subconscious likes familiarity.
Oh, yeah. We just roll out the same thing over and over again.
So we attract the same people into our life over and over again. That doesn't really prejudice of whether we're talking about a love relationship or whether we're talking about a work relationship. We're just attracting the same thing. And the moment you can recognize, what is it that you need to learn? What is it teaching you? Because let's face it, some of our biggest, and you've heard me say this before, our biggest grits, the grr, remember the grr? And the G triple R. So G standing for, well, while it's grr like a tiger, it's really gold. It's the gold behind the, adversity. So the R is the recognizing.
Okay.
So you're recognizing what this point of pain is and what is it that's repeating itself over and over.
Sure.
And then the second R is then releasing it.
Okay.
So by releasing it, that's the part where you go back and you learn, right? And then the third R, the final R, which is probably really good to wrap this question up, is revolutionizing.
Right.
So revolutionizing, I made that word up, of course, because I like acronyms.
I've heard it before.
Yeah, I know. But
I just,
whether it suits the topic of conversation or not, but the way that I'm using revolutionizing in this particular story is that It's tied in with legacy.
All right.
So, I often talk about the 5 master keys, and number 5 is the legacy. And that's when, you're quite evolved.
Mm-hmm.
You've really been able to heal a lot of trauma. You've really been able to look at a lot of your pain. And because you've recognized or realized, then you've released.
Okay.
And then you've had to go back and look at what's been happening. But then revolutionizing is where you break it. So the pattern is broken. You're making the change. Okay. You're cutting it off and saying, no deal. Okay, no deal.
No deal.
We ain't doing this anymore. We're going to go down a new track. And that is the revolutionizing. And the best way I can imagine for that is to just imagine that big movie screen, and instead of painting it as this, big drama series movie, Days of Our Lives, or something
big
a Stephen King horror movie, make it your best ever superhero. You're the superhero.
Right.
You are, and you are living your best life. Now they say, and I know we're talking about staff people here, but don't be specific with people. So, for example, if you wanted to have, Joe Dispenza or, Stephen King come and work for you, don't be specific on that person, because they may not be the right person for you.
Okay.
And this goes with love as well.
Right.
Be more specific around what it is that you actually want. So by seeing that big movie screen and saying, well, I'm highly respected. I'm, for example, for you, Callum, I'm a boss.
Well, you're a business owner, absolutely,
I'm
which is incredibly tough.
Yeah. And then, therefore, you have to go into the resources. Well, what do I have to do to be respected? What's it going to take? What are the things that I need? I'm going to have that real connection. I'm going to have strong boundaries. See it. How do you look? How do you stand? What are you wearing? How does your voice sound?
I think ultimately it's that word you just used. Boundaries, right? I actually feel for Callum on this one, because it's very hard, especially if you're a people person, and if you're in a people person kind of a business, right? A service industry where you're dealing with other people. You want to be pleasant. You want to have those nice relationships, but the problem between employee and employer, it's a bit like, being you need to be a parent in life.
Yeah.
You can't be your kid's best friend.
This is true.
You have to have those boundaries.
Yeah.
And this is a tough one, especially if you are a people pleaser, especially if you're a person of service. So, Callum, my point I'm just going to say basically what you've said, but with the reinforcement of boundaries. I think
and you hit the nail on the head there about the friendship thing.
Yep.
Because Ian and I did the same thing.
Right.
And naturally, in a lot of ways, let's face it, you go through phases in your life. Who you rub shoulders with is who you become very close to.
For sure.
So where's the boundary line? So, for example, we would be teaching people, with neuro-linguistic programming, and we'd have so much fun. It would be awesome. But you've got to be able to know where to, have that, look, here's the one of the things that I really want to say.
Okay.
If you put someone on a pedestal, and this is not my saying, they'll end up in the pit.
Okay.
And
you're giving him a push, are you?
Well, the fact is that, there was there's a big guru in the televangelistic world at the moment. And I'm not going to say his name because I think it's fake. But I want to say that for people's sakes here. But I saw it on TikTok. Now, TikTok's not always the greatest place to see. It's not always real life, but it's not always real life. And I shared that with someone very close to me who looks at this person as an absolute guru. Okay. She listens to him every single day.
Gotcha.
And she was devastated. absolutely devastated. But now, because he's been threatened as a fraud and this and that, and look, if it's true or if there is any truth in it at all, it's not the first time this has happened. But the fact is that people are people. This is what I want to say. So even if you become friends with your staff or your staff become friends with their boss, the fact is that nobody should ever put anyone up on that pedestal, because you are putting them into outside of a field of their humanness. And then when glory falls short and life happens, oh, but they shouldn't have done that because they're that person. So they get judged even harshly, more harshly. So I really feel that I suppose this would be more for your staff, but not to have you, or not to put yourself into a position of being lonely at the top and, everything else. I feel that this is where authenticity plays a huge part of, and I think you're very good at doing this, Aaron, and that is really, communicating your vulnerabilities with other people. So don't be afraid to do that.
Well, I think being vulnerable is very important, because it's being honest. It's just being honest.
It is.
And I mean, I'm very lucky in as much as I have a terrible memory. So I can't be bothered with lies because I can't remember them. Right? So be authentic, be real, be vulnerable, and because it's you.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. And yes, it can be very difficult with those boundaries. I'm a person who breaks boundaries all the time. I'm lousy with it. Okay. But I'm also a work
But you're breaking the good boundaries, because you're breaking the ceiling, and you're, that's different. I reckon that's smashing through.
I appreciate
that's
you saying
that.
But I think sometimes to my own detriment, I do have issues with boundaries.
Okay.
I think, and something over life, it's only actually something in the last few years I've really actually started to truly understand. And I'm happy about that, because we are a work in progress. Okay. Like, honestly, I'm not the same guy I was when I was 20. I'm not the same guy I was at 30. If you're not going through life and you're not looking at yourself and being honest and actually reassessing yourself and going, you know what, I could tweak this a little bit. I could make this a bit better. I'm a race car. I could make this a little bit faster. I could make this a little bit lighter. I could make this a whole lot lighter. But you know what I mean? Like, we just need to realize that we're never going to be a completely evolved being. But I'll tell you right now, the thing you have to do is just keep bloody working on yourself.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Life is not perfect.
No.
Change the hats, put on a different hat, and ask yourself questions. What would I be thinking with a hat of wisdom on, and another hat of happiness on, and another hat of confidence on, and maybe another, and you can have a whole assortment of hats and say, which hat am I going to wear today?
Beautifully put. And with that, I think we'll need to end the show. As always, we've gone well over time. That's what we do here. But an absolute pleasure having you here, Terry. And honestly, it's so good to have real, honest, gritty conversations, right? It's important. I really thank those who have come forward with their questions as well. And I can see lots of people in the background have been watching on all the different streaming services that are out there, and we really appreciate that. If you could share that love a little bit with a bit of a like and a share, we're actually changing tack a little bit, and we do need to start looking at building up our YouTube and things like that, because good old algorithms, how they all work, they keep changing so constantly that we do really need your help on that one. Otherwise, you know what? Let's just go out and be really kind to each other. Learn from fantastic people like yourself, Terry. A bit of NLP is very, very good. A bit of replugging of things, and away we go. So, any last thought before I hit the old stop button, rather?
I just feel like everybody just needs to know how awesome they are, and that life happens, and just know that there's always meaning behind everything.
Love it. All right. You've been watching The Genius Zone here on Edge Radio Australia.